So in my last video, I walked you through step one of my resilience framework, which was all about being real. Now, the second step that I want to share with you today is about regulation. And the third step in my framework is about renavigation, which is all about looking at the small ways that we can help change the situation we're in and take action. Because as humans, we need a sense of agency and to feel like we have some level of control over the way that our life is going. Now, action taking is super important, but it's step three for a reason in my framework. And it's a really important reason why step two is about regulation. Because when we actually go through difficult times in our life, it's very common that we'll feel stressed and overwhelmed and anxious and all of those sort of big feelings and emotions. And when we feel that way, what often happens is that our sympathetic nervous system gets activated, or what we often refer to as our fight or flight response. It's the survival state that we go into. And what happens when we are in that state is important because what we do see is a significant brain shift and therefore a significant shift in how we think and respond. So when we're in our survival state, in our sympathetic nervous system, our amygdala, which is the fear center of our brain, the part that's very involved in emotion and our fight or flight response, basically overwhelms another part of our brain, which is the prefrontal cortex, which is what we sort of call our thinking brain. It's the part of our brain that helps us think rationally, make decisions, weighs up pros and cons. So what this means is that when we're in a survival state, we are thinking from our amygdala, not from our prefrontal cortex. And what this actually looks like is that we make decisions from an emotional place. We can often make decisions that are very reactive. We make decisions that are very sort of short-term focused, not long-term focused. And this can be a problem. So if you've ever looked back in your life and sort of reflected on the times you might have made decisions in that heightened survival state, you've probably seen this at play, where you might think, what was I thinking? Or why did I make that decision? Because you've now, with the benefit of hindsight and a calm brain, can see that maybe it wasn't in your best interests. So what we want to do is that when we are going through difficult times and that we want to find a way through, firstly, we want to work with our brain and not against it. And that's why step two is about regulation. Because in order to make the brain switch to not have our amygdala sort of running the show and we can fire up our prefrontal cortex again, we need to regulate our nervous system. And we need to shift from our sympathetic nervous system into our parasympathetic nervous system. So it's super important that we do this before we try to problem solve. And so the way that we also want to do this is to work with our body first before we start engaging our brain. Now, this is really tricky. If you're anything like me, I'm very much like a top-heavy sort of person that when I'm going through something difficult, I'll often be researching it or reading books or being quite intellectual or academic about it. But when we're in that heightened state, it's not a really effective place to be. And it's taken me quite a lot of years to relearn this concept of coming back into my body, engaging my body to actually calm my nervous system. Because we can change our psychology by actually changing our physiology. And that's what this step is all about. And so the first thing that we want to do is engage our body in ways that send calming signals back to our brain and to our amygdala. Because the mind-body connection is truly phenomenal. In the same way that our body will send messages to our brain sends messages to our body. But we can use this incredible mind-body connection to actually help regulate our nervous system and come back to a place of calm. And so we want to engage our body in particular ways that help send those beautiful calming messages. The first way that we want to do that is through breathing. Now, we all know the benefits of breathing, but sometimes we forget how something so simple can be so helpful. So when we're focusing on taking long and deep breaths where the exhalation is longer than the inhalation, we're really getting that breath down to the belly. What we do is that we are regulating our nervous system by changing our heart rate, changing our oxygen, carbon dioxide levels, and activating our vagus nerve. Now, there are a lot of different breathing strategies out there, and I really encourage you to check them out, try them and see which ones work for you. But I wanted just to share one with you that I have really enjoyed over the last few years called the physiological sigh, where you're taking two inhalations quite quickly and then a long exhalation through the mouth and repeating that 3 times. So it looks like this. I love this strategy. Even just after 3, you just start to feel some of that tension easing and some of those changes, you're feeling calmer. So I encourage you to look at breathing strategies that you can use and incorporate them into your day to help regulate your nervous system. The second strategy is about movement. Now, again, we know the value of movement, but again, sometimes it's something that we don't do. Now, breathing strategies are obviously incredibly effective, but if you're like me, there are times when the stress is just a little bit too high, you feel a little bit too amped up, and sitting and trying to breathe through it to regulate your nervous system is incredibly challenging. So movement becomes a dynamic way that we can actually regulate our nervous system. And the great thing is that it helps us to complete the stress cycle. So when we are in our fight or flight response, some of the changes that happen in our body is that we have 2 stress hormones that are released, first adrenaline and second cortisol. And we also see like a big dump of glucose in our body. All of this is designed to help us to fight or to run away. The problem is a lot of us have our fight or flight response activated in life where neither of those things are required. Often it can happen while we're like sitting at our office desk. And so we've got all this amped up feeling, all this glucose, all this cortisol, all this adrenaline, and it's really not healthy to have that just sitting around in your body. Not only does it feel horrible because you feel very amped up and uncomfortable, but it's also not good from an inflammatory point of view, from a diabetes point of view, all of that sort of stuff. So the beauty of movement is it helps us to start using up that adrenaline, cortisol, and glucose, helping us to sort of complete that stress cycle, which sends all those great messages back to our brain. So go for a walk around the block, put your favorite track on and dance around the room, head out to the garden and do some gardening. Even housework can be a great way to engage movement to help sort of use up any stress or tension that you are feeling. But if you're anything like me, you may also have some health or illness challenges that mean exercise is a bit of a challenge for you. I definitely have limitations around that from an energy point of view. So I have found over the years that yoga has been a hugely beneficial tool for me to use to really help regulate my nervous system. So I've always found the more gentle versions of yoga really, really helpful. And for me, I love yoga because it also incorporates breathing. So it's a way to be sort of more dynamic with any stress, tension, or overwhelm, but also to be engaging the breath as well. So that's what we want to do, is look at how we can actually engage our body through movement to help us to regulate our nervous system. And the third strategy is one that I've actually come to really appreciate in the last few years as I've had my own sort of health challenges to deal with. And this is engaging our senses, obviously through our body. And I like this because there are some days when breathing or movement just feel really difficult and challenging for me, particularly if I'm really unwell. And so I still might be sitting with a lot of anxiety or overwhelm or discomfort or grief or loss or all the things we can go through when we're up against really challenging times in life. But by actually consciously thinking, how do I engage my senses today? What it does allow us to do is to come into our body and get out of our head that's often looping around with these stressful thoughts. It connects us to a sense of comfort and joy and pleasure. And it also can have the power to connect us into these big, beautiful feelings of wonder and awe to help get us out of our own little perspective and hyper focus on our own challenges in our life. So what can this look like? So if you're going through a tough time, I really encourage you to think, how can you make your day more sensual? You know, really savor that cup of coffee in the morning, the taste, the smell, the warmth of the cup, you know, sit in the sun and enjoy a cup of tea, light a candle and run a beautiful warm bath and put some lovely salts and essential oils in. You know, have a lovely blanket that you love cozying up with on the couch, bring some beautiful flowers into your home. If you can get out into nature, that's hugely beneficial because it helps engage so many of our senses, and it does reconnect us with that sense of wonder and awe. So they're my 3 strategies to help you to start to move into step 2 of my resilience framework, which is about regulation. So we've firstly been real and come to that place of being honest and authentic about how we're feeling. We've been truthful with ourselves and others. We may have even come to a place of empowered acceptance about what we're going through. We then want to move into this state of regulating our nervous system, because when we go through tough times, there is absolutely no doubt we're up against a lot of stress, a lot of overwhelm, uncertainty, fear, all those big emotions. And then from that place, we have, rewired our brain to be in that place to be able to think clearly and critically. So we can move to step 3, which is then about renavigation, looking at how do we take those small steps in our life to feel like we have a sense of control and agency amidst times that can be really difficult and may be out of our control. And so that will be step 3, which I will share with you in the next video.